What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to another Forewarned video. As you can see on the top of the page, we are going through all 160 lore pages. So what I will do is I will put gameplay over the top of this reading, just so you guys are a little bit more entertained. Hope you guys don't mind, but without further ado, let's start this off. So page 1. During the 18th dynasty, Pharaoh Petemet II grew paranoid of conspiracies forming to overthrow his rule. With snakes lurking in every corner of his temple, Petemet only confided trust with Totorn, his top general. The pharaoh summoned the general to his quarters, demanding he provide a solution to quell all threats against his power. Around this time, the elite Mejai force had reached its peak of strength throughout Egypt. Guardians of royal crypts, palaces, borders, and pharaohs themselves, the Mejai were tactfully placed to serve protection where needed. They served honorably with unparalleled skill in battle. As such, General Totorn quickly gathered 7 of the most powerful Mejai across Egypt, bringing them to the court chamber of Petemet to gain audience at nightfall. Entering the chamber, the general exclaimed, "Great Pharaoh, these warriors will protect you with their lives and strike down all who dare oppose you. They are the most powerful Mejai of the land, though each of them follow rather unconventional means of battle." The pharaoh stirred in his throne and said, "Unconventional? Present them to me so that I may know who guards my life." The general queued for the Mejai to align themselves for the pharaoh to bear witness to their might. Rathos approached the throne first, bowing to the pharaoh while meeting his gaze. "Move closer to the torchlight," the pharaoh commanded. "I cannot discern your face from the shadows." When Rathos hesitated, the pharaoh prepared to dismiss him in anger, but Totorn interjected, "Great Pharaoh, Rathos has suffered great burns in battle. Proximity to fire is not his strength." Rathos suddenly took a large step closer to the pharaoh's throne regardless, revealing his full form in the torchlight, covered entirely in linen wraps. "He's mummified," asked the shocked pharaoh. "How can he possibly be swift in battle?" "As I had said, Great Pharaoh, the burns were great," answered Totorn, "but his bindings do not slow him down. It is said that Rathos was ordered to find and kill a group of merchants who hired assassins to eliminate competing merchants. When he had successfully discovered their hideout, Rathos soon realized he walked into a trap, as the ground and walls were covered in cedar oil and the doors became blocked off with large stone slabs behind him. Suddenly a lit torch was squeezed through a small window space, igniting flames around him. Townsfolk had said they could hear Rathos screaming while smoke erupted from the house. Mystery shrouds the events surrounding what happened next, but it is believed Rathos called upon the strength of Ogdog, the 8 primal deities of the Old Kingdom. As primordial roar was heard from inside the entrapment, and as quickly as the flames had ignited, they extinguished with an abrupt hiss. Next to approach was Dekan, famed for his physical strength and accuracy in battle. While he did bow to the pharaoh, Dekan did not lift his head to meet the pharaoh's gaze as Rathos had. "Look at me," ordered Petemet, "my king. Dekan is blind and cannot see you," Totorn quickly clarified. Greatly insulted by this offering of a warrior, the irate Petemet roared, "You dare suggest this sightless mongrel defend me?" The pharaoh then hurled his chalice of wine directly at Dekan, who caught it midair and growled. The pharaoh noticed Dekan's eyes possessed a dull haze, and as he lifted his head to reveal his face, General Totorn then explained, "Great Pharaoh, while Dekan does not see as you and I do, his awareness of the environment around him exceeds that of any warrior I've ever known." Dekan believed all of his power derived from Ra, deity of the sun. He had often stripped himself of his garments and stood under the hot Saharan sun, seeking more from Ra. This eventually led to boils forming across his skin, as well as blindness as he would stare directly in what he believed to be Ra himself. Ouphris presented himself before the pharaoh next, boldly appearing in the torchlight to reveal his figure. The pharaoh, dismayed, asked, "What sort of trickery is this?" For what Petemet had seen was a replica of his own self looking back at him. Ouphris briefly took a step outside the torchlight, returning into view, then with the liking of General Totorn. "That is enough, Ouphris," said the general. "Great Pharaoh, as you can see, this warrior flourishes in the skill of depicting those around him." "Interesting," stated Petemet, "but what use does this have guarding me? Surely my enemies will recognize the deception rather quickly." Totorn explained, "Ouphris is a master of infiltration, my king, and will snuff out dangers before they even manifest themselves." Tutorn was correct in his description of Ouphris, for the warrior had deterred many threats against the royal family and upper-class aristocrats throughout his service. One such instance was during the plot against Shakir, a silk trader from Naga Ashalababa. Shakir's twin brother Herban had grown envious of his accumulated wealth and success, so he planned to murder his brother and take his place. One day Herban led Shakir outside of the bazaar, promising to introduce him to an interested buyer of silks and bulk. When far enough from the bazaar and isolated in an alley, Herban moved to stab Shakir with a serrated blade, but the attack was blocked by Shakir with a smile on his face. Herban suddenly witnessed who he thought to be his brother transformed into Ouphris. Herban was found with large puncture wounds, slain in the alley. The pharaoh leaned forward in his throne, scanning the chamber around him. "You told me I would have 7 guardian Mejai general, no?" Just then a face appeared seemingly out of thin air from the shadows, mere feet from the pharaoh's throne. Speechless, the pharaoh looked towards the general for an explanation, who smiled proudly and said, "This warrior is known as Necreph the Shadow." The general continued, "Necreph uses darkness to his advantage to strike enemies from the shadow. His stealth is unmatched, and by the time his foes see him, it is too late for them." It remains unclear as to how Necreph gained his power. Rumors suggest Necreph entered an unholy covenant with a dark priesthood of Setek worshippers. The priesthood offered Necreph the speed of a jackal and the strength of an ox, so long as he moves in darkness. However, they demanded the life of Necref's lover in exchange for these powers. Necreph, thinking he could trick the priest, brought forth a sarcophagus with a long rotting corpse from a nearby crypt. After his powers were granted, the Setek worshippers became privy to the deception and bound the false sarcophagus to his back with chains with a permanent spell. Despite this, Necreph had grown so powerful that the extra burden did not slow him down. He slayed the priest for their transgression and continued his service as Mejai. After these events transpired, Necref's foes always heard the rattling of chains shortly before their demise, although they still could never quite see him coming. "Allow me to introduce the 5th Mejai," started Tutorn, but Petemet interrupted. "I've seen enough. These warriors will do." Just then, a knock on the chamber door echoed throughout the hall, and each Mejai turned posed for battle. From the darkness crept in Akar, high priest and ritual master of the pharaoh. The general gave a signal, and the Mejai stood down. "What is it, priest, that you should interrupt this audience?" demanded Petemet. Akar answered, "My king, as skilled as these warriors may be, they are still mortal coils made but of flesh and bone." He continued, "Allow me to perform a ritual that will extend their lives to protect you for eternity, at the cost of 1 drop of your royal blood. So long as your blood flows, these warriors will not fall." Tutorn remarked in anger, "No, Akar, I am aware of your reputation in blood magic, and I will not allow these warriors to undergo your abominable ritual." Pharaoh Petemet arose from his throne and roared, "Silence, general. I will hear what this ceremony entails." Akar proceeded to explain, "Each of these Mejai are to bring their most prized possession to the ritual chamber. A circle of protection shall be marked on the ground with 1 rune per warrior." Akar then withdrew an ancient dagger from his robes, presenting it as well as a golden chalice to the pharaoh. He continued, "Performing this rite with their beloved possessions will ensure their bodies are bound to our physical realm, while the drop of your blood will ensure their souls remain in service to you." Before the general could argue, Petemet exclaims, "These Mejai will be granted immortality so long as I breathe, a blessing and an honor. We shall proceed with this ritual, and I will not be overtaken by usurpers." The Mejai returned the next evening, each bringing their own most treasured relics, placing them atop the pre-drawn rune in Akar's ritual chamber. They organized themselves around the circle, and the pharaoh's blood was drawn from the tip of his finger with the dagger into his chalice. Akar began to chant, at which point the general almost interceded, if not for the raised hand of the pharaoh. The circle around them began to glow a faint red, growing brighter as the blood from the chalice was poured into the crevices of each rune on the ground. The torches in the chamber suddenly extinguished, and each Mejai let out a blood-curdling scream. The general quickly relit a torch to find the warriors looking taller, fuller, and bowing their heads to the pharaoh. And so the 7 warriors' destinies were sealed with the pharaoh's life, sworn by blood and bound to the world by their relics. After this event transpired, General Tutorn remained wary of Akar's intentions, as well as the warriors themselves. Therefore, Tutorn had founded the Order of the Mejai, tasked with keeping track of the warriors' whereabouts and routines. We who write these pages belong to this sacred order. For a time, there was peace. The Mejai had thwarted all threats against Petemet and even assisted in reinforcing and expanding control throughout Egypt. As Pharaoh Petemet lived out a long life during his reign, his bloodline had spread far and wide. So did the mortality of the cursed Mejai. The duty of our order has persisted throughout generations. 7 centuries have passed since the dark ritual took place, with Pharaoh Petemet long deceased, yet the Mejai still live. As the general suspected, the ritual was not a blessing, but a curse. During the ritual, Akar had said to the Pharaoh, "So long as your blood flows, these warriors will not fall." The ritual bound the Mejai to this plane so that even if the blood of the Pharaoh's kin still flowed, the warriors were cursed to serve and protect them. For centuries, the 7 Mejai continued to fight the descendants of Petemet, although as the lineage continued to proliferate, the Mejai seemed to feel the burden of immortality on their bodies and mind. It wasn't too noticeable at first, but each Mejai grew increasingly grotesque in appearance, with some common folk claiming the warriors took on a monstrous appearance during battles. Battles themselves were fought more fiercely and mercilessly, until eventually the cursed Mejai struck down innocent civilians. We believe that having lived hundreds of years as servants protecting the Pharaoh's kin, the Mejai were driven mad. Some in the order believe it was due to living beneath the hot Saharan sun for too long. Some say the human mind is not meant to bear witness to centuries of death. Regardless of the cause, the cursed warriors began slaying those to whom they were bloodsworn to protect, perhaps in hopes of ending their cursed existence. While on their unholy crusade, they brought death and ruin to all who stood in their way, regardless of bloodline. Therefore, for the safety of Egypt and its citizens, it was the undertaking of our order to seal the Mejai away from the society so they could not continue their blood rage. Unfortunately, with time against us, we could not prepare the banishment ritual that would lay these once great warriors to rest, but now we needed to trap them. However, we did leave the items necessary to perform the ritual throughout the ruins. 7 of us were assigned to recover the Mejai's relics from the burial site of Akar and hastily depart to distinct locations to lead the cursed beings away from populated areas. We had received word that the Mejai were aware of this transgression and were on their way to take back their respective relics. Each of the 7 of us traveled to remote abandoned temples previously used for the dark rituals in service of Apep, Lord of Chaos. We had each taken the relic to the innermost chamber and placed them in a sarcophagus. Now we each wait for the cursed Mejai to descend upon us, a sacrifice we're willing to make to save humanity from their evil. If everything goes according to plan, once the Mejai enter the temples, others in our order will seal each entrance behind them with a hacker spell of warding to prevent the Mejai from escaping. Once done, the order will be tasked with burying the temples deep in the Sahara sand so that no one will enter or unleash the Mejai within. It won't be long now. I hope these pages will never be read and these temples will remain buried for all eternity. If someone is reading this, it means something went wrong, and the temples were uncovered. It means the Mejai will have been sulking in rage, yearning for the opportunity to wreak havoc on humanity as revenge for their physical and spiritual imprisonment. If you have unsealed the temples of the Mejai and freed them, civilization is about to face unparalleled destruction. It is now your responsibility to gather all relics, using the canopic jars and the Ushabti to banish each Mejai from this earthly realm once and for all. You have been warned. With the time I have left before the Mejai descend, I must give notice of other dangers to overcome in the trials ahead. Shortly after the formation of our order and learning of Dark Priest Akar's ritual, a few among our ranks became allured by the notion of eternal life. While our order was intended to maintain a watchful eye on the Mejai, these dissenters wished to join them in their immortality, viewing the Dark Priest as a god. What started as a few descendants spread to dozens as they spread the word of Akar's blood ritual to anyone tempted enough to listen. We in the order refer to them as the Zealots of Akar. Once amassed, the Zealots had entered the Dark Priest temple to promise servitude in exchange for everlasting life, just as the Mejai had been granted. Elek, one of the first men to dissent from our order and seek out those eager to join Akar, approached the Dark Priest with his head bowed. Elek exclaimed, Lord Akar, the Order of the Mejai was formed by General Teuton in mistrust of your powerful acts. Those of us gathered here have abandoned the misguided order to demonstrate our loyalty to you. The Dark Priest, enticed by the notion of servants, replied, I suppose you hope I might bestow upon you the same blessing I had granted the Mejai. All heads in the chamber bowed to Akar and grin formed on his face. Very well, Akar started. You know what the blood rite requires. As with the ritual performed on the Mejai, each zealot was asked to bring one item they held close to their heart in order to bind their souls to the earthly plane. Having won many battles and conquering numerous feats, the Mejai possessed invaluable relics, which were used for their ritual. The zealots possessed lesser, but still rare artifacts that they had kept in their families for generations. Akar began the necessary preparations, forming the ritual circle with red ochre and malachite. To start, 7 of the zealots approached with their rare artifact and placed them accordingly. With nearly 100 zealots gathered within the dim ritual chamber, Akar sliced his own hand with an ancient dagger, letting the blood flow into the now glowing red runes. The 7 zealots partaking in this ritual began to tremble as they felt their blood running hot, muscles tightening uncontrollably, and bones beginning to fracture. Screams echoed throughout the chamber. When the torches in the chamber were relit, the onlooking zealots were horrified to witness the carnage that remained of first 7 zealots. Bones, guts, and other unidentified masses were scattered around the ritual, with Akar covered in blood himself. Many zealots shrieked at the gruesome sight and fled from the ritual chamber, never to return to Akar. Some even attempted to rejoin our order, but General Teuton had them executed for their betrayal. Initially puzzled by the disastrous outcome of the blood ritual, Akar came to realize that the bodies of the zealots were much weaker than those of the Mejai, and therefore could not withstand the power placed on their beings. To make up for this, Akar theorized that combining the bodies of zealots with those of wild beasts might be enough to sustain the physical strain on their physical form and soul during this ritual. And so Akar tasked his loyal follower Elek with capturing some of the most vicious beasts he could find. With a small group of zealots, Elek ventured out at dawn for the hunt. They had captured ferocious canines, savage birds of prey, fierce reptiles, and more. Akar once again prepared the ritual chamber, this time with the beasts assembled in cages around each room. Only a couple dozen zealots remained after the grisly failure of the first ritual, and those left were hesitant to volunteer for this next attempt. Elek approached the ritual circle. Lord Akar, allow me to be the first to undergo this ritual and be blessed with immortality. Akar grinned a dark smile and commenced with the blood ritual, reciting the sinister ceremonial words. When the torches extinguished, the beast roared in harmony with Elek's own screams, and all zealots in the room gasped with what they saw next. Elek arose as half man, half beast. The will of his human soul and the might of the wild beast upheld his form. While he walked on 2 legs, his face was that of a beast. He turned to face Akar and bowed. Each subsequent ritual with the remaining zealots succeeded, with all of them transforming into terrifying combinations of man and beast. The task Akar assigned to the zealots and his service remained a mystery to those of us in the Order, so there is not much that can be said about the events that occurred between the rituals and Akar's disappearance. One day a few zealots entered the undercroft of Akar in hopes of new order or commands. When they could not find their master, they searched in every temple and dark cave the Blood Priest was known to frequent, all to no avail. Even those of us in the Order of the Mejai searched for years for the Dark Priest, but there had been no sign of Akar in all of Egypt. Some claim Akar fled in fear that one day his followers, as well as the Mejai, would realize their immortality was more of a curse than a blessing. Others believe a ceremony performed by the Dark Priest went awry and led to his own demise. It wasn't until 3 decades after his disappearance that our order located a hidden chamber within one of Akar's temples, giving us another clue as to his whereabouts. Inside the chamber we found the corpse of Soref, a member of our order, with a scroll of papyrus tightly held to his chest. He had attempted to infiltrate the zealots of Akar to learn of their motives, but was apparently found out before he could escape. We had carefully opened the scroll to discover Soref had gotten close enough to Akar to learn that the Dark Priest had left Egypt to find more civilizations to spread his influence in blood magic. Soref's notes also seem to imply Akar was in search of other powerful warriors like the Mejai, but ones who would swear fealty to himself instead of the Pharaoh. Since the Dark Priest was gone, the Zealots found themselves without a leader. They turned to the Mejai themselves in the meantime, hoping that Akar would one day return to seek them out. Just as the minds of the Mejai had grown mad over the years, the Zealots grew to forget who they had served and for what purpose. However, the instinct and desire to demonstrate loyalty remained, and now all that the Zealots are capable of knowing is service to the Mejai. To this day, the Mejai warriors call upon the Zealots during their hunts, even training them in combat to thwart their foes. Should you hear the footsteps of man and the guttural screams of beast, the Zealots of Akar will soon be upon you. It is imperative I share what I can regarding the remaining Mejai that served Pharaoh Petemet II in hopes that I can prepare those who must face them. Given the hindrance to criminal activity, bounties were occasionally placed on Mejai, though few were ever successfully carried out. That is until the fateful day the Mejai Talgor was sent to investigate rumours of a band of thieves forming to raid royal crypts within Alexandria. Arriving at the outskirts of a decrypt temple in the desert far south of Alexandria, Talgor had caught a glimpse of a large group of men armed with khopesh blades and bludgeoning clubs. Not one to care about the odds, Talgor had perilously entered the structure ready for a fight, when he was ambushed by sellswords who were not planning a coup, but instead staging one to lure Talgor inside. When Talgor came to, echoes of voices screaming in torment surrounded him, rendering him unable to move or act. The voices finally quieted, allowing Talgor to look up and see none other than Anubis, god of the underworld, glaring into Talgor's very soul. One day, years after this occurred, General Teuton claimed to have heard the sound of smouldering lava, with the room drastically heating up. Teuton jumped when Talgor spoke to him despite being nowhere in sight, explaining that he struck a deal with Anubis to depart from the underworld. This deal seemed to come at a price, for while Talgor believed he had escaped intact, he was forever from that day concealed from the naked eye and blistering hot to the touch. Talgor was forced to bid farewell to his family, as his presence would only harm them. However, General Teuton ensured Talgor his service would be the most valuable as one of the elite Mejai. Few possess a tale as disturbing as the sixth member of the elite Mejai, Ataimon the Abominable, also known as the Flesh Wielder, the Necromancer, and the Surgeon. During his time guarding the Pharaoh, Ataimon became acquainted with the Dark Priest Akar, who tasked the Mejai with bringing back the bodies of slain foes to his undercroft. Akar would then utilize various body parts of their remains and perform dark magic to form what General Teuton would describe as abominations to serve him in his various tasks. One day, Ataimon was grievously wounded in battle and would have likely perished if not for his immortality granted by the Mejai ritual. He gathered what he could carry of his enemies' remains to Akar, who stitched them remains onto him, making him not just whole, but better. Ataimon learned that adhering limbs and other various body parts to himself enhanced his strength and vitality. He learned the dark magic necessary to perform the task himself from Akar, and even became skilled at creating his own abominations to fight alongside him in battle. Over the years, when Ataimon would slay a mighty foe, he removed a part of them and augmented it to himself, always improving himself as time went on. These adornments would come at a cost. With every eye he attached to himself, the more sensitive light he became. With every limb added, his movement would grow more encumbered. Ultimately, Ataimon the Abominable was the first of the Mejai to become mad. Some suspect that the flesh he had adorned himself with still possessed the souls of their original owners, seeking vengeance. And there we go, guys. That is the story of all the Mejai. That was pretty insane, I must admit. So it's weird though, because I always thought that the Mejai were human at the start and then they turned bad. But it seems like, judging by some of those stories, like Ouphris turned into the monster. So these guys were always monsters by the sounds of it. Some of them, obviously, like Dekan, obviously he burnt himself. He wasn't necessarily a monster. He might have looked a bit weird, but like Ouphris, Necreph, he was kind of monstrous, I guess. The only thing I can think of with Ouphris is maybe he wasn't a monster. He just turned into a human and then went back to his normal human form, which would be interesting to know what his human form actually looks like. But everything else, obviously Akar, very, very, very bad guy. I feel bad for some of them though. Like, for example, Ataimon, like, he was a bit crazy by the sounds of it. But Talgor, for example, he was just doing his job. They were all kind of just doing their job, and they were just, I don't know, they kind of got cursed because of it. I also don't understand why on earth they would work for Petemet, because he didn't seem like a good guy. But maybe they had no choice back then. But yeah, there we go. Obviously, that is all 160 lore pages. Hopefully you did enjoy. Obviously, we have a new update coming out this month. Not sure when it's going to happen, but I would assume, judging by the lore pages we've just read, that there will be more lore pages added. So I will try my best not to take ages on this one. But yeah, guys, hopefully you did enjoy. Let me know what you thought the best part. Whose was the best story? I thought they were all pretty cool. The Necreph one does explain the sarcophagus though. I did not realize that is the reason he wears that. That's kind of crazy if you think about it. But yeah, hopefully guys you did enjoy it. If you did enjoy it, please smash that like button because it helps the channel out loads. More people get to watch it. And also, if you're new to the channel and you like this kind of stuff, Forewarned or any sort of horror ghost hunting stuff, we have tons of it on this channel, so please subscribe. But yeah guys, thank you very much for watching. Have a lovely rest of the day, and I'll catch you in the next one.